Black Rifle Coffee, baby. Breeding fuel.
Yeah, we're out here at Black Rifle Coffee headquarters in Salt Lake City, and this is you guys' first time out here. I've known both of you for a while now, probably Brandon longer, right?
Yep.
Like we met back out in Colorado, and it would have been 2013 or 14-ish, probably in that time frame.
Yep, at least a decade.
Yeah, I got out of the Army and then moved out to Colorado, and one thing that I love about Colorado, speaking of Colorado, is there's a great Ranger community there. They do a monthly Ranger breakfast. I heard about that, showed up. That's where I met you.
Yep.
What a great place to like get out of the military and then immediately plug into like-minded people.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Blayne, you and I think kind of gravitated in the same circles for a long time. And we've talked right between Team Red, White, and Blue and Go Ruck and these different things that you've been involved with over the years. And obviously, you know, you're a former Special Forces officer. Brandon's a former Ranger, competed at Best Ranger competition. Did you win Best Ranger competition?
Did not. We placed third. Jeremiah Pittman and I placed third.
Oh, okay. Well, I've been telling all these people that you told me that you won the whole thing multiple years
Very
in a
kind
row.
of you. Certainly never said that.
I like how you said, you didn't say I've been telling people you won. You said I've been telling people that you told me that you won.
Yeah. It ain't easy having pals.
Yeah.
You know? This is the way it is.
You know, I just want to make sure that we get the rumor mill going.
Yes,
and,
certainly
you know,
never
one of
said
these
that.
days that you
certainly never said that. Proudly podiumed in third.
Yeah, which is
for the record, never competed in the Best Ranger competition. I just want to make
for
sure
the
that
record,
we're clear about that.
never competed in anything even remotely approaching something as hard as
what do you
Best
give me
Ranger
a hard time
competition.
for? Give me a break.
I'm not giving you a hard time at all.
I
I just want to make sure that I do something to make you a little bit uncomfortable here. Like, you know,
we get you off your mark.
Are you trying to get me off my mark?
Yeah, a little bit. You know,
okay, that's cool.
Like that's that's what makes these things fun. You know,
I'm gonna really focus now.
You can't. You're gonna get distracted. I
give up. Let's just drink coffee and enjoy our time.
Yeah. So you guys are. So yeah, I mean the proper introduction here. Blayne Smith, former Special Forces officer, co-author of Perseverance. God, I gotta look at the front of the book right now. I'm sorry.
Get it together.
Perseverance versus Endurance.
No, still wrong.
No, try again.
That
would be the other way.
Blayne Smith, co-author of Perseverance is Greater Than Endurance.
There's a little math involved.
Subtitled, Lead with Resilience, Grow Through Adversity, and Win Together. Jake, are we back on our spot here?
For the record, you read that quite well.
Look, it's not my first day.
I know.
Unlike Marty.
No, it's literally my first day reading any cover of a book that includes words in the title that
you only
aren't
write
represented
books. Is
by
that your thing? You don't read books. You just write books.
I'm a storyteller. I've never claimed to be like a great grammar guy or a great reader guy or any of those.
It was really the math symbol that threw you off, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I'm 100% words. I mean, so this is a quick little vignette here that's fun. In high school, I was so adamantly against this idea that we would combine letters and numbers and call it math. Like math in my mind was just strictly numbers. Why would you get outside of that? Why do we need to solve for X? X is in the alphabet. Why are we even messing around with that, right? And I believe this is very sound reasoning, and there's no evidence to the contrary of anything that I'm saying right now.
Yeah,
but you had to have 2 math credits to graduate high school, and you could either do 3 science and 2 math, or 3 math and 2 science. So I went 3 science and the 2 math. Mine were geometry, which I had to take twice and to pass. And then the second one, instead of doing like an algebra 2 or an algebra 2 pre-calc, I found a loophole in. I took the special ed math class, and that was my second one. But I was really good at all the other things, and I'm a little bit ashamed. Only a little bit ashamed to admit I didn't even get like an A in the special ed math class, where like day 1 of this, I'm not lying to you, was here's how you turn on a scientific calculator. Like the Texas Instruments TI, here's how you turn on. That was day 1 as a junior in high school that I had put myself in thinking I was getting over. And not something that, not my proudest moment in education.
Army Ranger.
Yeah.
Math is hard, bro.
The signs were there.
Yeah. So like the greater than or equal, I don't know what kind of symbol that is that you guys put on your book there.
Yeah. It's a little fence you got to jump. If you want to read our book, you have to at least
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing I appreciate about the book is you've got all sorts of helpful diagrams in there and illustrations, and there's pictures for people that maybe are looking for the picture section.
Well, we knew you were
Um,
going to read it eventually. so.
Those are just for my daughter. There's 2 pictures that include my daughter
And for Marty.
for Marty. There it is. So you and Penelope are both happy with the result.
That's about where my level is at. So, and I assume that your daughter is smarter than me, by the way. So,
I mean, IQ wise, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm confident voting in her direction at this stage. Yeah. So all that being said, I'm stoked that you guys are here. We're here at Black Rifle Coffee. And, for people that don't know me, my name's Marty Skovlund. I've been at Black Rifle for a long time. You've probably seen me on a couple of podcasts. It's usually Evan Hafer here or Jared Taylor or Logan Stark or a couple of the other guys. I've occasionally done these. I used to do the coffee or die thing for Black Rifle for a long time. And now I shit post in comment sections and make memes and things like that for our social media. So, and occasionally now host friends on a podcast to talk about, actually really important things and not just my educational shortcomings. So
We'll get there.
Yeah. All that being said, though, I would love to just, there's a lot of people that listen to this. I think that it's really important to highlight veteran stories and sort of where you guys came from. And it's not your whole story. Both of you are very accomplished in a lot of different avenues, particularly in business. Some of the consulting work that you've done, the leadership courses that you're like. There's a lot of amazing things that you guys have done over the years. But you started. I think you both started in the military, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, Brandon, do you want to go first there?
So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and immediately after graduating high school, I joined the Army. First flight I ever took was from Oakland, California, out to Atlanta, Georgia. I went down to Fort Benning and went through the entire OSIT process, infantry. At Airborne School, I volunteered to go to Ranger Indoctrination Program. I passed Ranger Indoctrination Program, was assigned to the 2nd Ranger Battalion out in Washington State. And then I spent the next 9 years in the 75th Ranger Regiment. So 6 years up in 275, did 4 total rotations to Afghanistan. Went down to Ranger Regiment headquarters, particularly because we needed to kind of take some reps off from the sideline, take a couple plays off. It had a pretty chaotic kind of start to our marriage. That was all kind of bound up in the towers falling in 9/11 and my wife's mother dying. And got a chance to do a Ranger Indoctrination Program, which was what we used to call Ranger Assessment and Selection. Got to be there as we started to transition from basically 3 weeks of we're going to smash you against the rocks. And if you're still standing in some way, shape, or form at the end, you can be a Ranger, I guess, to let's start giving guys the tools that they need to be successful when they meet their platoons over in Baghdad or Bagram. As we started to mature into Ranger Assessment and Selection, I got to do pre-Ranger course, which was an opportunity to take the young Rangers who are coming to Fort Benning to then go to Ranger School, then go back to their battalion and become leaders. So after all of that, I decided that I needed to start making my way out. My last hoorah for the Ranger Regiment was actually at the 2006 Best Ranger competition. Got to do that with my good Ranger buddy and partner, Jeremiah Pittman, who's a 175 guy. And it was a blast, man. It was a real adventure. I tell people this quite frequently that in many ways, when I got to 275, it felt like I arrived at the land of misfit toys and I kind of finally fit in somewhere. Because I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area during just a high period of affluence, 80s, 90s, a lot of growth. And, my dad took off on us when I was 11. So I was a poor kid on the inside of this affluent culture, but kind of an outsider on the inside. And so it was cool. Being a Ranger was such a huge part of, it is such a huge part of my story because it really, in many ways, was the first time I felt like I fit into a family wholly. And so it was very difficult to leave that, but I ended up making the choice to move on so that I could try my best to be a husband and a father. And got a chance to do a couple things. Worked at West Point as the operations sergeant for the commanding general of West Point, which is known as the superintendent, 3-star billet. And then the last thing I got to do in the Army, which was by far one of the most rewarding, massive blessing, is in 2007, 2008, I got the chance to be a platoon sergeant, platoon trainer for an infantry basic officer leader course platoon. And, again, young lieutenants, they had just graduated their commissioning source, just put their bars on, and they knew they were going from us to Ranger School and then, once again, over to Bagram or Baghdad to meet their platoons. And they were so switched on. I got such a great opportunity to just kind of live Abrams' charter and give back a little bit before I made my exit. And so I got out of the Army in 2009.
Yeah, I think that's just such a interesting time period. I kind of nerd out over the Ranger history stuff, and it's such a transformative period, not just for Ranger Regiment, for a lot of places in the Army and the military across the board, but specifically for Ranger Regiment, where there was a little bit of a change in identity that was happening, where you were an NCO during that time, and
Yep.
a part of that change, not just in the selection process, but the types of missions that Rangers did, and all of that. You talk about you're putting guys through RIP or pre-Ranger or IBOLIC, and they're going over meter. Like, I think about myself. I graduated RIP in summer 06, and then it was 6 weeks in between when I graduated RIP and when I was in Baghdad.
Yeah.
You were not guaranteed a full training cycle or anything like that in those days. And those are, again, you put it in the context of history. That's when the surge in Iraq was going on.
Yeah.
That was when, Afghanistan, it's like there wasn't it wasn't a huge emphasis, but the stuff that was happening there, you have things like the Red Wings incident that happened during that.
That's right.
I don't know if incident is the right word, but the downing of that helicopter
Initial.
and the search. Really consequential things that were happening.
Yeah.
This was you almost maybe don't, or maybe you did a better job of appreciating it than I did at the time, but you look back on it and you're like, wow, what a time to be in the military.
Yeah.
And
very much. I think I could see more clearly after the fact. Frankly, when I was in the midst of it, I knew that we were transforming. And, at the time I was a sergeant first class as I was starting to make my way out of the regiment. And we kind of had our one foot in two worlds, elite light infantry and special operations force. And we were learning a lot of hard lessons. I myself and my platoon, we had gotten a guy, he probably had been on the ground for 5 days, and then we get alerted for Winter Strike 2003. And you think about this as, 6 months prior, this young Ranger was in a cap and gown walking his graduation stage at high school. Now we're in Afghanistan, and it was a very chaotic experience, a bit of a chaotic mission set. We talk about it. I talk about it in the book. It's the first chapter in the book where we talk about Winter Strike, because it was really a good illustration of where I learned quite a bit about perseverance. And I think the Ranger Regiment is an incredible model of perseverance, because the way that we distinguish perseverance from endurance, with endurance, you're essentially kind of putting your shoulder to the wheel and getting through a defined period of hardship. That's great. Endurance is highly valuable, but perseverance, you are going through a undefined period of change and uncertainty that really requires you to transform, to meet the moment, to become the person that you are called to become the leader you're called to be. For the Ranger Regiment, we needed to become the Rangers that America needed us to be, and no longer the Rangers of the 80s, 90s. The world didn't need that anymore. They needed a direct action, tip of the spear strike force that was able to sustain operations for over 8,000 days, as it would turn out, and to be there in the midst of that transformation and to be a senior non-commissioned officer in that. It really is a gift now that I look back on it.
Yeah, how long it lasted. I do, think of looking back at high school. I remember being so nervous. I came into the Army in 2005, didn't get my first deployment until 2006. I remember being so nervous that I was going to miss the war. And that's so hilarious in retrospect. But at the time, you're just thinking man, I'm going to be one of those guys that looks like they're the right age to have been in Iraq or Afghanistan, but I didn't because I missed it, just because timing works out the way that it does. And, turns out that was not a problem at all.
Certainly wasn't. But we didn't know it back then, did we?
No. Brandon always says that we were like a bunch of kids that wanted ice cream, and we all ended up with a cold headache.
Yep. That's really
which is a
accurate.
good, because I felt the same way, man. I graduated in 01. 9/11 happens just a couple months later. I get sent to a tank battalion at Fort Hood, and I'm like, dude, this sucks. We missed it. It's all going to be in Afghanistan. It's all going to be light infantry. I'm going to be stuck in the motor pool. We've totally missed it.
So did you come in as enlisted first, or when you say graduate, did you say graduate high school or graduate college?
Yeah. So I graduated from West Point in June of 2001.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and my plan, Marty, I'm not embarrassed to admit it because it's just true. I graduated high school in 97, same as Brandon.
Respect.
Yeah, and unlike Brandon, who was like, I'm joining the Army. I'm going to be John Rambo. I want to go be an Army Ranger. Like, he knew what he wanted to do and was assertive in his pursuit of that. You can ask the story sometime about knocking on the RIP guy's door at airborne school. I was not like that. I graduated high school in 97. Didn't have any real desire to serve in the military or anything crazy like that. I wanted to go to a good college, get a good education. I didn't have a lot of money to pay for said college. And so, it was go to school in Florida, get in-state tuition, maybe get a scholarship kind of thing. Or try to go somewhere out of state and just take student loans, get buried under debt, which, like good Midwestern parents were like, that's the devil. Don't dare do that. So I was like, okay, that doesn't seem like a good option. And then this option of going to West Point kind of got floated to me because I played golf in high school, of all things. I played competitive golf in high school and was pretty good. And the golf coach at West Point started recruiting me. Was like, did you know we have a Division I golf program up here at West Point? And I'm like, I didn't know that there was ever sunshine up there.
Yeah.
And it's like, so, but that's how I got a foot in the doors. They recruited me to play golf. And I started kind of scratching my head and thinking, well, a world-class education, price tag is right. I mean, it's not exactly free because then you get to spend 5 years on active duty to basically repay your educational commitment. But I could play sports, get a good, and so I was like, okay, sounds like a decent deal. And in 97, it was a pretty good deal because Clinton era, drawdown Army, down to 10 divisions. People were going to the military academies and getting out early. They were offering them outs in 2 years, 3 years. And I'm like, sweet.
Yeah.
I'll just take my world-class education, serve a couple of years, shuffle some papers around, and I'll move on. That's really what I was thinking I would do. And then of course I get there and they start indoctrinating you into like duty honor country. And you're like, maybe this Army thing's not so bad. But even still, when I graduated, I was like, I want to go be an armor officer because tanks are cool. I had enough machismo that I wanted to be a combat arms officer, but like, there was a thing at least then at West Point, like they made the infantry feel so cheesy. It was like so hua, like high and tight. And I was like, dude, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But I was like, armor's kind of the next best thing because you're still like a maneuver arm, but you're not the infantry.
Like any ranger, I think anybody that's not a ranger, you immediately look down upon. But like as an adult now, I look back, I'm like, man, tanks are really cool.
Right?
Like,
Dude, those
tankers do
ones,
some
I'm like,
amazing things. Like those, we had like I remember specifically my first deployment, we had a tank platoon or a tank company attached to like our task force. And their whole thing was they would go do like a 3-month rotation with our task force out of their 12, 15, 18-month deployment. But they would do it about mid-tour where they'd really gotten to know, in this case, the streets of Baghdad, like the back of their hands. And to see these like M1 Abram massive hulking tanks, just like, it's like Fast and Furious Baghdad edition. Like it was incredible to see the way these guys can, and you look at them and like, I'll knock on tankers a little bit here. Like first blush, you're like, oh, this is a soldier. Like they not all of them are physical specimens, they can drive a tank.
The politically correct term is fat tanker. I think is what you mean to say. I'm allowed to say that because I was with the
right. Like you've got, and it's just like, but man, they can drive a tank and man, they know what they're doing. Like
they can wreck shop with that thing.
Like I would hate to be on the wrong end of a tank, like an entire tank division. Like so the fact that you like I don't knock it off from me like, yeah, man, like tanks look pretty cool. Like I don't blame you at all.
Yeah. So the thing about tanks, it's kind of about being in a tank battalion is a little bit like a microcosm of war in general. And what I mean by that is it's short periods of absolute intensity and ecstasy and like thrilling stuff that is, sprinkled around a lot of kind of boredom and maintenance and time in the motor pool. And if you think about most of your deployments, I mean, some of yours might not have been quite like this, But most combat deployments for most soldiers, they would tell you that like you're spending a lot of time sitting around,
Yep.
kind of smoking and joking. You're bored. Even if you're out like on an OP or doing a checkpoint, like it can be a lot of boredom. And then all of a sudden something kicks off and it's like incredible intensity for a short period of time. Being a tank platoon leader was a lot like that. I mean, the highs were incredibly high. Doing 40 or 50 miles an hour across the desert, you know, it's not like an old European theater war movie where it's like you kind of come up through a hedgerow and stop and fire. Like, no, it's amazing technology. It's like an Apache helicopter on tracks. They're really amazing.
What's you probably know this as a former armor officer. There's a famous 73 Easting in Desert Storm.
Yeah,
you read
that's our
about
boy,
that.
McMaster.
Yeah, like you read about that and you're like, that is what tank warfare looks like in I guess it was still the 20th century, but like that's like 21st century tank warfare. Like you look at some of the things, again, I think that special operations, you know, you're like, oh, fast roping and shooting cool guns. And I was just like, man, tanks are actually, like, again, I totally get, you know, you hear about some of these things that they've done, even in recent history, you think it's all World War II or Korea, like tanks. No, they've been implemented. And just like with airborne operations, right? A lot of people look at airborne operations or the airborne capability as strictly a sort of outdated method of infiltration. It's not. I mean, you can use it for projection of power. It's been used a lot. Brandon?
Yes, it has. I mean, we got to do a jump in, 2003 in the tri-border region of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an information and operation observation campaign. We spiked up some movement, and lo and behold, a couple days later, KSM was snatched up. So there you have it.
Yeah. Like it can be used for a lot more than just strictly taking ground or strictly, I remember, Rangers run, their calling card is the airfield seizure. And you almost always, you think that this is like the least sexy thing that we do, but you have to do it and be competent at it. I remember the entire thing shifted in my mind when I had a squad leader be like, you realize this entire capability is that we come in the middle of the night in some country we're not supposed to be in and kidnap somebody and then get out in the same period of darkness. Like, that's kind of cool. I'm like, oh man, that is kind of cool. Like, that's a really cool like, we're just like a really expensive kidnapping mission here. Like, that is,
well, when you put it that way,
right? It's all about in.
Yeah.
And I almost wonder, like, when you guys talk to different people, it is all how you frame things as a leader sometimes, right? Like it is like you can completely shift the paradigm of like the way an entire organization looks at something just if you tell the right story around it or shape it in the right way, right?
Because I think the challenge with most people is they get too wrapped around what something is not, right? And you guys were Rangers. I was a Green Beret. There are levels of cool that just go to the sky, right? Like you're never going to get to the coolest.
Grass
whatever.
is always greener.
Yes.
Doesn't matter how far you get.
Exactly. And if you get so wrapped up on what your mission or your unit or your company for that matter is not, like you completely miss what it is. And if you spend any time in real combat, you see the guys from like the 91st Engineer Battalion out there sweating their asses off all day, every day, running effectively infantry patrols in Baghdad neighborhoods, getting shit done. And if you don't have respect for that, then I can't help you. Like you don't know what you're talking about. And if those guys spent all their time worrying like, well, we're not the fifth group guys who are over here doing that cool thing, like you're missing it. And it's a terrible waste. And I remember being a conventional Army guy in Iraq in 2004, and I got to work directly with the fifth group guys, which really kind of sealed the deal for me to want to get into SF. And yes, I thought it was cool. Yes, I was impressed. I liked working with them. But one of the things those guys actually reminded me was like, what you guys are doing is important. You're actually good at what you're doing. We need you out there doing what you do. And they validated that by coming by pretty regularly and dropping off like a Falcon View printout and saying like, hey, we're super busy. We don't have time for this. But if you want to go get this, have at it. And we'll talk next week. And that was really validating for me. But it was an important reminder, like, we're over here for a year. Like, and the SF recruiters even told me the same thing because I was like, I got to get in the war. I'm dying in the motor pool over here. Like, put me in, coach. And they're like,
yeah,
man, you're a platoon leader. Like, go be a platoon leader. You need to go do this right now. You have plenty to do right now. When you're a first lieutenant promotable, come back with your packet and we can talk about being an SF officer. And I was like, oh, that's right. I probably do have some important shit to be focused on right now.
And how important is that to get that PL time before you become a team leader in SF. Like how important is that to not come in as just not, I can't imagine a guy coming into SF as an officer and having to take over an ODA and not have that PL time, not have that experience leading troops.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I could have done it. I mean, I'm sure there are people that could, but I was a tank platoon leader for a year. And then I was a brigade reconnaissance team leader for almost 2 years after that. So I had like 3 years of platoon leader time, a lot of it in combat. And, you know, I was still learning. By the time I got to the Q course, I still had obviously an awful lot to learn. But I showed up to my first day on a team and was like, I'm the least experienced guy here. You know, I've never been an SF guy before other than my time in the Q course. But at least I did have a little bit of confidence to fall back on. And it was probably helpful for my teammates. You'd have to ask them, but they were probably like, well, at least this guy's got some time downrange and has a little bit of experience under his belt. But having that level of maturity, not just to know what to do and have some capability, but to know what not to do and what you don't know. Because as you guys know, combat is a pretty humbling thing. And you realize like, this is not fun and games. This is not something you can just sort of like go into haphazardly. It's serious business. And knowing that before you get to an SF team is kind of a nice thing to realize.
And I have to imagine that when you show up to your team for the first time, you've probably at this point in the war, you've probably got a team sergeant that is going to be your partner in this, that has probably multiple combat deployments, I imagine. But you've probably got, again, I'm just thinking about the time frame here, you've probably got 1, maybe 2 18 X-ray guys that maybe don't even have a deployment in yet as they're coming in, right? Like, was that the circumstance for you?
That was almost exactly it for me, yeah. And in fact, there's a guy that was on my team, 18 X-ray, his name's Eric, who lives here in Salt Lake. We're going to see him and go snowboarding tomorrow. He showed up to our team.
I'm going to ski.
Yeah. He showed up to our team, and my team sergeant Bunky, it was on a Friday, and he says, hey, good to meet you. Glad you're here. When we get to the team room Monday morning for PT, the fridge should be full of beer. And Eric looks at me and says, Roger, Sergeant, I'd love to, but someone's going to have to go to the store with me, because he was 20.
Wow.
At that time, he was the second youngest person to have ever earned a Green Beret. He was 20 years old. I hadn't had his 21st birthday yet.
And you got to have everything kind of line up perfectly for that to even happen. Like the training, because you've got to be, I think it's 19 to even get an 18X contract. Like things have to line up with, like, you got to get the right MO. Like if he was an 18 Delta, that would not have been
definitely not.
Right.
No,
like things have to line up just so to even be in that circumstance.
Yeah. So I will tell you though, for me, I thought that was really cool, because I showed up, my team had just gotten back from a deployment. So we were getting ready to go into kind of a down cycle, you know, back to a workup training cycle. And I was all full of like piss and vinegar, like ready to go take the war. And some of my team turned over. There were guys that had been there a long time that rotated out, went to SWIC or whatever. About half the team were guys that had some experience and had been around a little longer. So I had, you know, Eric is kind of the extreme example, but I had 3 or 4 other guys that were either 18 X-rays or brand new to the team. And it was cool because we had a chance to sort of come up together and train up together. And it was good to have the newer guys on the team, because they were like me. They had been in the Army. They'd worked really hard to get on a team, and they didn't show up just to hang out. You know, they wanted to be Green Berets. They wanted to get in the fight. And so there was a level of kind of ambition and energy and urgency that we had to the guys on the team that I think permeated throughout, you know, all 12 or 13 of us, that ended up being really important, because we had a lot of time to train up and get ready for our deployment to Afghanistan. And I think, you know, most of the teams that had a lot of seasoned guys on them, they were great. They knew what they were doing. But I think for me, I would have been like, guys, come on. Like, what do you mean we know what we're doing here? Like, I want to go out and train. And I was lucky that I had a team full of guys that felt like I did, which was like, no, we need to get this together and work over this next year or two.
I think that's interesting. There's one thing that I've come to know, you know, so I never a Green Beret or anything like that, but
you were a Ranger. It was sort of like that.
Well, no, I would say it's like very
we
different, like culturally, right? Very different. Even though there's plenty of Rangers that find their way into a Green Beret at some point. I've had the opportunity to go in bed with a lot of SF guys over the years, and I've come
Did you
to
say
really
in bed with a lot of SF guys.
Yeah, in bed,
Okay,
not in bed.
It.
Sometimes, I mean,
It's getting weird.
shared a cot. Yeah,
It's getting weird.
But you know, I've come to really appreciate that. But it's one of those things where you look at I think in Ranger Regiment, yeah, every platoon has a little bit of a personality, but you're, for the most part, like the deviation isn't that big. What I've seen with ODAs and SF is like from ODA to ODA, company to company, battalion to battalion, group to group, there is a massive massive sort of variance in the sort of culture around each ODA.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that there's some that are like, no, man, we kind of know what we're doing, and probably a little bit more of a low key training cycle or attitude towards a training cycle. And then there's other ones that are a lot more of like the go getter attitude. I think in range regiment, you don't have a choice. It's like, it's all go, go, go,
Yeah,
go
it's kind
all
of
the
full
time.
tilt.
Yeah, right. And you're never in a situation where like, oh man, no, we've all got like super experienced guys, because the turnover is so much
Yeah.
more.
Usually
Whereas,
about every.
yeah, like SF guys, it's a little bit different there, you know. So I think that's interesting that you had the opportunity to have a team where you could really sort of be a go getter and have full buy in. And I imagine that kind of like paid dividends on the battlefield. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it personally because I think it just fits my personality. And Brandon would know this because we've worked together outside the
Mhm.
Army for a long time. Like, I like working on small teams, and I like being able to have some say so in driving the culture,
Mhm.
kind of the temperature of the team. And I don't think I would have been very happy being somewhere. That's why I went to SF in the first place, was so I could
Yeah.
have some autonomy and some agency over how that went and have some influence on the personality of the team. But you're right. I mean, they vary pretty widely from team to team, and the personality of the team leader and the team sergeant to a large degree as well, or the dynamic of that duo
Mhm.
ends up making the attitude of the team in many respects. You show up at a hallway at an SF company on any given Monday morning at 6 a.m. and there will be teams that are drinking coffee and hanging out, and there'll be teams that are already out doing PT, and there'll be teams that are stretching out back. I mean, there'll be teams that are in the weight room, there'll be
Mhm.
teams that are out rucking. I mean, having that level of say so in what you do all the time is a great level of responsibility. But I mean, that's why people are there, because they want that.
Yeah. And so that good point. How did you two meet? I mean, I feel like I don't know the joke, but it feels like, you know, a Green Beret and a Ranger walk into a bar, you know, I don't know. But like, how did you guys bump
Yeah.
into each other?
Yeah, so we both got out of the military around the same time. I got out in
Mhm.
2009, Blayne in 2010, and we met as sales representatives for a healthcare company at a national sales meeting. So, talk about two guys completely out of place here, trying to figure out how do we wear our suits and our ties and what do I do with my hands when I'm in this kind of posture. And, we just kind of connected at a national sales meeting and we're like, okay, these are my people. And we were very fortunate, I should say, because we weren't the only veterans there. In fact, this company was kind of an early adopter at seeking veteran talent and really bringing them in, and particularly junior military officers. And so we had kind of a neat little cohort of people
Mhm.
where we were all trying to figure it out, and it was really actually kind of funny. So like, and for me, I was actually finishing my bachelor's degree as I was finishing the Army. So my kind of story, because you have to have a bachelor's degree to do medical sales, really is where I'm
Mhm.
leading to with this. And I went straight into the Army out of high school, and so like I was that guy who was putting on a pot of coffee at 9 p.m., doing my homework from my kitchen table, going to bed at 2 a.m., waking up at 5, going back in, doing PT. I guess that probably explains why I was so ramped up and angry as a RIP instructor. So sorry.
You're welcome.
But yeah, exactly. But it was cool because when I got hired, because this was a company that was kind of early adopters, and because there were some other folks who had been a couple years ahead of us, good colleagues and longtime friends and mentors like Jason and Matt and Joe, they were kind of able to interpret a little bit, and they actually waived my requirement of a bachelor's degree. And I'll never forget Jason, one of the guys that hired me, both of us actually, looked at me and said, like, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't care about your bachelor's in sociology. I care about your decade in special operations. We're going to put you into an expansion territory. We're going to throw you at the wall to see if you'll stick. We're pretty confident that you'll figure it out.
Mhm.
And it was an awesome experience, but it was also really freaking hard.
Mhm.
And so you kind of led in a little bit with the power of story, especially in leadership. And this in many ways is what we're doing in this podcast, is sharing these powerful stories, because we get the opportunity to share stories because stories can open up new windows into old truths about grit, determination, perseverance, all of these things. For organizations that are going through challenging periods, stories can unlock potential. It can unlock hope. It can keep people focused on where we're trying to go. It can reorient us to our vision, especially when we're in kind of the dark depths of the valleys that we sometimes hit. And it was so powerful to be in a situation where I was given a chance to go from something that many people would say is like, you're hard pressed to find a more difficult path than to be a Ranger for almost a decade, right? Many people would say that.
It's demanding.
Yeah, it's a little demanding. You're hard pressed to find a more difficult path than to, in Blayne's case, play Division I golf at West Point, be a Cav BRT, a platoon leader, go to SF, all that stuff. Hard pressed and all that. You know what else is really freaking hard? Getting out of the military. Healthcare sales, really freaking hard. Sales, really hard. Marketing, growing a company from an idea into a national movement, or even getting revenue positive. All those things are challenging. And I bring it back to the story because it connects so cleanly to what we're talking about in terms of, I was a Ranger. Look, when I was a 19-year-old Ranger, I thought all that mattered was Ranger. When I was a 25-year-old Ranger, I thought all that mattered was Ranger.
Well, when you were a 19-year-old Ranger or a 25-year-old Ranger, it would behoove you to have that mindset of this is the only thing that matters. Keep your eyes focused on.
And
your first sergeant would agree.
Yeah.
And what I learned as that 25-year-old leader of Rangers is we better damn grow up and figure out how to operate in this joint environment, or we are gonna get lost in the sauce here. We are gonna lose our decisive edge and what we can bring to the table that nobody else can do, right? Because nobody else can do what we do, right? Nobody else can do what SF can do. Nobody else can do what the SEALs can do, MARSOC, the whole 9 yards, all those special mission units. It took us a lot to figure that out and to figure out where we fit into that, and to not just acknowledge, but respect and honor what other key players in the paradigm were doing. Because I'm here to tell you, 2002, the early 2001, 2002, early days of the war, 2003, it was not a pretty picture. It was not pretty at all. All of us being on one compound, we didn't even know how to talk to each other. We didn't even like each other. I mean, God's sakes, back then, Ranger platoons didn't even like Ranger platoons.
Yeah. And
so it was a really interesting kind of growth experience, which come back to, how we met. It was a good lesson for me in those days. And then I had to keep relearning that lesson as to how do I evolve? How do I change? How do I grow? How do I become a sales professional? How do I meet people who otherwise I probably would have never gotten to know? I mean, I was with the same guys for a decade. Same dudes I served with for 10 years. And then all of a sudden, what are you going to do when you voluntarily separate from that, right?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Brandon. I'm here to sell you.
Fill in the blank.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's interesting. I think that's actually a really fortunate, I'm sure it was challenging, but I think it was a very fortunate situation to land in, where you are able to get out of the military, walk into an organization, and the guy hiring you is like, hey man, we're going to throw you into new territory and like, go figure it out. To have a leader that has that confidence in you of like,
yeah,
hey, go. And I'm sure for you, it's like, you would probably, I'm speaking for you a little bit here, correct me if I'm wrong, you'd probably rather have that, let me go figure it out, than be dictated every...
Well, let me speak for myself. I was like, of course you would. I got this.
Yeah.
Like, you know who you're talking to there? And then like 3 months later, I'm like, holy shit. And so when this guy and I met, I'm just like, do you kind of have what the hell's going on here? Like, are you figuring this out? Because
can you believe how much these people drink?
Wow, too.
And that's
I
where
thought we were good in the service, man. I was like, whew.
Sales guys, you got to take the edge off. But I mean, for you going into sales, I imagine, like Ranger, smash, like just go break, and like you don't really have to work by, through, or with anybody. Yeah, you might want to figure out how to, operate, like you said, in a joint environment, be able to just like put coherent sentences together in front of other units that maybe don't speak the same language operationally as you. But for you, you're literally dealing with working by, through, and with other cultures.
That's why I was asking him, how do we figure this out? He had been there. I'd been there longer than him. I'm like, dude, anything you got for me, help me out.
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely true. Like I had a lot to learn. I'd never been in sales before. Like identifying yourself as a salesperson, making cold calls, like wearing a tie. It was uncomfortable, certainly in some, but I had total confidence in my ability to do it though, because in my interview, they're like, you don't have any sales experience. Like, tell me about how you're going to do this. And I said, well, I've been an SF officer the last 3 years. I lived on a tiny little compound in Afghanistan with 90 Afghan security guards and a village that was 100 meters outside the wall. So if I wasn't good at making friends and persuading people and aligning incentives, we could go to bed one night with all the guns pointed out from the towers and wake up in the morning with them pointed in. So pretty high stakes sales going on. They're like, oh, that's a fair point. We'll hire you. So I often deploy a little false modesty here, but the truth is I was pretty good at it right away. Like I certainly had a
Rookie of the
steep
year
learning curve, but I went out and figured it out. I also had a reasonably good territory. I was down in Florida where it's kind of a target rich environment for healthcare sales. But I went out and I figured it out kind of like an SF guy. So my first few weeks or months, I'm wearing like my navy blue suit, my white shirt and red tie, because that's like what sales guys wore. And I'm sweating and I'm uncomfortable. Like I really did not feel like myself at all. And I couldn't perform because I was just like, hi, I'm Blayne. I'm here from, it just wasn't working. So I took the jacket off, never wore a suit again, kind of rolled my sleeves up, got out there, and I started going out into rural practices throughout kind of Central and West Florida and just going into places where I could talk to people and make a human connection and kind of ditch the folio and like the pitch, so to speak.
In Central and West Florida, they don't care what kind of tie you're wearing or what. Like
No.
that is not. You don't have to worry.
They don't want to
about
see
that.
a tie.
No.
Yeah, that is like you don't. They don't care for the facade that a lot of guys in more metropolitan areas have to put on, whether that's their identity or not. They have to put that sort of facade on.
That's right.
You go to the place where it's like, oh, these are my people. I know how to talk to these people.
Exactly. And if the first soft imperative is understand your operational environment. So I was like, okay, let me just take a step back from the things I learned in sales training were valuable, but I had to take a step back a little bit and say like, how would I assess this if I was doing kind of like OPE and preparing the battlefield and assessing the situation? And so I just started doing things the way that I thought they made sense in my environment. I started using what I had working to my advantage, actually to my advantage. And I leaned really hard into like the human training that I got when I was in SF. And I was like, oh, I know how to do this. I can go make a cold bump on somebody, establish rapport, build trust, etc. And so I just started catching traction and building from there. And I was pretty good at it pretty quickly and did well in the job because I could actually use the tools I learned in the military to be good in the private sector. And so in that regard, it wasn't so bad for me. What I suffered with was just driving around hundreds of miles a week by myself in my car with like the soundtrack of my military career playing in my head. That was actually harder than going in and making sales.
And that I can definitely
Likewise.
I can definitely empathize with that. My last 3 years in the Army, I was a recruiter in Central New York. So another, 45 minutes outside of Syracuse, just Central New York, farmland, very rural, all that sort of stuff. Comfortable for me because I'm from South Dakota. Different state, same sort of people though for the most part.
Yeah.
But yeah, you go from I actually got delayed coming out because there was a epidemic with recruiter suicides at the time. You take these guys that like they, go do a deployment or two. A lot of these guys 12, 15, 18 months, they do 1 or 2, maybe 3 of them depending. And then they come down on orders for recruiting or drill sergeant, right? And then they get, drill sergeant, you're still in that military environment. Recruiting, you're completely away. You're completely outside of that military infrastructure. Yeah. You're probably around a lot of people. At this time, your bosses in recruiting are all guys that didn't deploy because they converted to be full-time recruiters before the war kicked off, So you're dealing with people that can't necessarily empathize with where you're coming from. And then on top of that, you're having to go sell kids' parents on going to war.
Why this is a good thing.
And you're spending hours alone in the car in these more rural areas. You are driving an hour and a half, 2 hours to each appointment. And sometimes if you've got a couple of appointments in a day, you're fortunate to have that, right?
Yeah.
But you're putting that time on the road by yourself in there. This is before the advent of podcasts.
Yeah.
This
sports
is
talk radio.
A lot of NHL, Sirius XM radio. I could have told you every
Jim
lineup.
Rome, Colin Cowherd.
But you get to like kind of get to know yourself at an uncomfortable level almost, especially if you're coming off of multiple deployments and that sort of stuff. When I went to recruiter school, they kicked me back. The joke at battalion was like, oh, fucking Skovlund failed recruiter school. Like, he got like, no, I didn't. I went there and they're like, you were supposed to have, because the recruiter suicides, you
didn't tell them about your math and pull out your TA, whatever, 85 thing.
I never failed a breaching test. I'll say that much on the math. I improved on the math.
That's right, baby.
But I went out there and they had this rule: if you have to have at least 6 months time at home or whatever, the dwell time, whatever, right, since your last deployment. Well, at that time, Ranger Regiment, you never had 6 months. You were deploying.
No such thing.
And I tried to explain that. They sent me back. We ended up working it out, but I had to go back and just kind of be the hey you guy for everything at battalion at that time, and ended up coming back. But you're still only, for me, I got a waiver and I was back. I started my recruiting time 4 months after my last deployment in Afghanistan. And I still remember I was getting there right as my company was going back. And that just happened to be the most deadly rotation for the company I came from, Charlie 175, of the war. Talk about like a hard transition. Like, it's a sales job. Like, recruiting is a sales job. You put it's all the same planning and everything that you do. I imagine we all had very similar sort of intro to sales, even though I was still in uniform at that time.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're dealing with that at the same time. I'm finding out like, oh, guys are like literally dying at a rate that they hadn't before. We were very fortunate at 175 for a long time.
Yep.
Between 2002 and 2009, we didn't have a single killed in action at 1st Ranger Battalion.
Yep.
Tucker Gar and then Anthony Davis in 2009. And then after that, you start getting that like Team Merrill and Team Dart, all the 2010, 11, all that. Man, it was tough. And I was never in that situation like, you were very good at your job. You were very good at your job. I was more of like the guy that you're like, Skovlund, you're the guy you're the reason we're tier 2. Like, I was that guy, right? So I was not ever under any sort of impression that like, oh man, if I would have been there, these guys were still alive. But you feel bad that you're not there for like
it's
the
brutal.
Guys,
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you're supposed to sit there and go sell people on stuff. For me, it was the Army, but for you guys, it's on pharmaceutical stuff that on any given day, how much did you actually care about what you were selling on certain days?
Well, so, I mean, it's interesting distinction. So we were in cancer diagnostic laboratory testing.
Get it right, Marty. Okay.
So pharma, we were not in pharma, but the reason I say that it's a little bit of an interesting distinction.
I told everybody that you told me that you were in pharma sales.
Here we go again. What is happening today?
After you won the best Ranger competition, you got into pharma sales.
Jeez Louise. So for us, I think a lot of us were pretty mission driven. Frankly, any of the people that I know who went into pharmaceutical sales, mission driven, and in this way, most people's lives have been affected by cancer in some way, shape, or form. For us, part of my story that led to us getting out is when the towers fell, my wife's mother had just had her first round of chemo. And so on 9/11/01, it turned out to be her 53rd and final birthday. So she went home the next day on hospice care. She had melanoma that had metastasized all over her body. And then she had a day of clarity. We got married on September 17th, 2001 in the living room. She died 2 days later. And then I deployed to the Middle East a couple of days after that. That's how my marriage started, right? And so we all had kind of like some kind of mission focus. And it's interesting because as Blayne's sharing some of the things that were kind of in his interview, it's very much part of that, soft imperative, the SF mission, the engagement, by, with, and through, and all this kind of stuff. While you are right that the Ranger mission, premier direct action raid force, right? I tell people all the time, we didn't hand out candy, we didn't hand out water bottles. If you saw us, you done screwed up, and you're never going to screw up again because we're going to take care of that, right? It's basically the way that we went down. But that's not what they were looking for. And this is where I think it's really important for any person that is exiting service to really kind of embrace what is the decisive advantage that you have. And so there's two things. So come back to mission focus, number one. If there is anything that a U.S. Army Ranger excels at, it is that we are people of extreme focus, right? Mission-driven, extreme focus. The purpose is the priority. The mission is greater than the moment, no matter how much it sucks, no matter how much we have to suffer through. The mission is greater than the moment. That's one. The second thing that really sold, and this is where I think it extends even further beyond Rangers, but I will say this, Rangers lead the way.
Mm-hmm.
That's our motto, right? We have been known for leadership since the 1700s. And so when I think of sales and we think of sales and we share this with other people out there, all sales is leadership.
Yeah.
And we believe that leadership is a relational process of influence that yields results. So whether that's, you are trying to engage with somebody who needs to understand where we're trying to move as a mission. They need to not just get the inspiration, but they need to find the motivation to get to the effort to get us where we're trying to go. That is a relational process. We are influencing, and it's going to yield a result.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't necessarily mean it's always good. We've seen plenty of leaders bring bad results around in the world,
Mm-hmm.
but they're leaders nonetheless because they're engaged in that relational process of influence. That's what was spoken in my interview when we were in there is, look, I will not relent. I will not give up. I will keep the mission front and center at all times. And if there's anything we know how to do, it's lead. And I say that because, again, go back to where we started with the conversation. Whether you're a tanker,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're in the 162nd Rudy Kazoo, whatever unit you're in, whatever you do,
Mm-hmm.
what military veterans have is what every single company in America is desperate for right now, which is leadership. And that's what we can never forget out and about there. And it drives me crazy. And I love talking to other veterans about this because you hear it so many times like, well, I guess I'll just get out and be a security guard, or I guess I'll just get out and be a cop.
Completely discounting their experience.
I'm like, hey,
yeah.
hey, sister, if you want to get out and you want to be a security guard, great. And hey, brother, if you want to get out and be a cop, that's great too. If you want to open your aperture, I would encourage you to remember what made you seek that service in the first place. What made you seek mission over comfort in the first place? All of those things come back to the character that you are, and you have been honed in some of the hottest fires on the planet to be an effective leader. So go out there and lead in whatever you want to do. And if that is being a cop or a security guard, great. But if you don't want to do that, don't sell yourself short, because you have what every company in America needs.
Yeah. And I think that there's something that you brought up there too, is that own personal standard that you have. That I think that's something that people often forget, is you're still that same person that pushed yourself in extraordinary circumstances to do extraordinary things. And there's nothing that for a lot of guys, sometimes guys lose their way. Sometimes guys forget, guys or gals, right? That at one time there was nothing that would be put in front of them that they didn't want to be the best at.
Yep.
Right. And especially when you get into like the world of special operations or combat arms in general, I would say it attracts that type of personality. And so you're going out there and you not only know how to lead, but you're also like, hey, I don't care what I'm doing. I want to be the best at it. I don't want Blayne or anybody else to be better than me. Right. Like, and you're thinking the same thing. It's that's just when you think about the environment that you create.
Yeah.
What a great environment. And then you layer in all these other things, right? Like on the topic of leadership, there's all these other little things that you draw out of the military. And I'd love to dive into this more of like, what are the things that you really draw out of your military experience that you included in the book, as well as, when you go and talk to these different companies. But I think about these little things like, you talk like the 8 principles of CQB, or those first 3, right? Speed, surprise, violence of action. It's like a business principle. There's like a lot to be gleaned from there. Little things that I was told, like as a private, when in charge, be in charge. It doesn't matter if all you are is doing is guarding the arms room or something, like when in charge, be in charge,
Yep.
right? There's all these like little things that we can all think of that we just absorbed during our time in service, but now actually they're gems, they're diamonds when you get out into these sort of corporate environments. But I mean, what are the things? Hey, for commercial break, Black Rifle Coffee has an energy drink. We got 3 of the flavors right here. I'm drinking Freedom Punch.
Mine's Ranger Berry.
Wild Frost.
It just called out to me. It feels like
Yeah.
I was always meant to have this.
Yeah. Man, these are genuinely, we were talking about a little bit before the show started, 200 milligrams of caffeine, only 10 calories. We made these be really clean, 0 sugar, all that sort of stuff. We're a coffee company, guys, here at Black Rifle Coffee. We're kind of like Hey,
Double
you know what?
fisted,
If it's got caffeine in it,
Hey, man.
I bet we could do it
Win a
pretty
black
good.
rifle, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
just
like
get it on.
if it's got caffeine in it, I bet we could do it pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, so and we are. These are like, you know, for those of you guys that are listening to this podcast, like these are rolling out in Walmarts and your local gas stations everywhere nationwide. Like they're rolling out everywhere, and man, like go pick up a flavor or 2 or 3 or 4 and go check it out.
Yeah, it's
And
like a pre-workout. I mean, we're going for a ruck after this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's
Yeah.
go walk Salt Lake City, you know? And that's, yeah, you know, nice, clean little boost there. And if you're not an energy drink person, then you're like, you know, hey, we still got coffee. We
Coffee's not going
still
anywhere?
got our core competency,
Yeah.
you know? But yeah,
Go
so
with what you know.
you know, thinking about these things from the military that you guys have really pulled into the book and into sort of the curriculum, the POI that you guys have developed over the years. I mean, what are the things that stand out for you?
Oh man. So I think it's really important to note that really what you were just saying is like we learned a ton in the military. Then we had to get out and then like the corporate world, like the very corporate suit and tie, big business world. And a lot applied, but a lot needed to be adapted and a lot needed to be learned too. So I think that was an important part of our growth. And then Brandon and I both went kind of on our own timelines over to Team RWB, which was a social impact organization. It was a nonprofit. And when I got there, I was the first employee. So we're talking about startups, volunteerism, nonprofit, you know, that kind of thing. So it's all had to be kind of refined and grown and adapted over a period of years. But you're right, there are certain things that remain true. And I'll take a step back and talk about some very basic ones. Like competing and winning still matters. This is something I want to make sure that we say this before we get into like the finer points of the book and things, because we're in a period of pretty wild uncertainty right now. You know, here in March of 2025, there are a lot of people who aren't sure what's around the corner. They're not sure what's coming next. You know, we're seeing contraction and businesses kind of tightening the belts, and people are concerned for like their personal job. You know, and people who are running divisions or departments are like, how do I get my people motivated with all this uncertainty swirling around? And we totally understand that. And one of the things that we're trying to reorient some people back on is like, hey, do you still want to compete and win? Does your business still have a product or a service that you believe in, that you want to get out there to people? Do you have competitors in the marketplace that you're trying to outflank and compete with? Like, if yes, sometimes it's important just to focus on what you're doing today. Focus on what we're trying to do this week. Let's go out and actually try to win, because as it turns out, winning is still cool and competing is still okay. And it's fine to appeal to someone's sense of greatness, right? And I think we've, over the last 5-10 years, understandably gotten to a place where we want to make sure people feel comfortable in their workplace. We want to make sure people aren't burning out. Like, we get all of that. And we speak about that often on the road. But we don't want to completely lose the plot when we're doing that, which is like, we're still a business that has a mission and is competing in an open marketplace. And if we don't compete hard and if we don't win, we're not going to be here for very long, right? And every individual person on that team still has their own hopes, dreams, aspirations. Everyone's getting up in the morning wanting to do their best. And if you're creating an environment that immediately, as soon as they come through the door, they're like, you know, we're just going to kind of muddle through this today. We're just going to kind of survive. We're going to sit on our hands and wait for the next shoe to drop. Like, that is not inspiring to people. And so one of the things that I learned, especially when I was in SF, is you show up every day, you compete like crazy, and then you high five, right? You give each other a little bit of shit, but you're still close as hell. You're looking out for one another, and you come back the next day and you do that again. And I think a lot of organizations really struggle to figure out how to create a culture where everyone can show up every day, expecting to give their best, demanding that of one another, compete like hell, wring yourself out with sweat at the end of the day, metaphorically or otherwise, and then high five, get your arms around each other, support one another, and come back the next day and do it again. That is a great recipe for success. And it's very hard to do that outside, you know, the kind of the military construct. But we've seen that at places like Team RWB, where we held ourselves to a very high standard. We competed internally. We competed like crazy externally. We, you know, our constituents, our members, our chapters demanded that of us. You know, I went over to GoRuck, and I know you know the folks over there. You want to talk about a competitive environment where success is excellence is demanded every day. And it's no surprise that those are the organizations that are kind of ascending.
They're enduring, right? Like,
And,
they are like these are all, Team RWB has been around for 15 plus years, maybe going on 20 at this
15
point.
year
15,
anniversary this
yeah.
fall.
Yeah, 15 years.
Still
Go
there.
Ruck is
Same.
coming up on 15. Like these are all organizations that were started. You know, Black Rifle similarly, right? We're coming up on 11 this year here, but like these are all organizations that are now all a decade plus under the belt. They're enduring, and the common denominator is they were all started by veterans, all started by, I think, prior special operations guys, actually, to be even more specific. I know Go Ruck and Black Rifle, Team RWB was...
So Mike Irwin, the founder, was an Intel guy at Third Group when I was there.
Okay, so
Yeah.
soft, yeah. And then on top of that, all three environments are very competitive environments, a kind of like earn it every day sort of place, right? Like very mission focused, mission driven.
Yeah.
Like those aren't coincidences.
No, it's easy to like, you could see them ascending and then kind of,
Mhm.
you know, taking the natural path as so many other organizations. But you're right. The ones that are not just enduring, but we would argue persevering, the ones that are kind of rolling with it and adapting and growing. I mean, you just talk about like energy drinks.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know how anyone here felt about energy drinks 4 years, 5 years, 6 years ago.
Mhm.
I won't even guess. But the bottom line is this is in demand in the marketplace right now.
Mhm.
You have a special set of capabilities that allow you to do this really well. So you're going to decide to do it. You're going to go all in and you're going to go out and compete like crazy. And you're probably going to win.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't do this before, but you do it now, and it fits. It's part of the mission.
And I'm glad you bring that up, and I'll take the opportunity to brag on the team. I wasn't personally involved with this, with the development of these energy cans, not the design, not the recipe, anything. But you look at the typical timeline for a company, any company, many times often significantly larger than ours, right? To bring a canned product to market, 18 months at a minimum, right? Like 18 months is your bare minimum plan for that. These guys did it in 6 months. They brought 4 different cans to market in 6 months. From development of the flavor profile, like the actual chemistry, right? Like the actual, like, make the product and the design, everything in stores in 6 months. And so I'll capitalize on that opportunity to plug the product, but also to credit the team and sort of that environment that we're talking about here. That doesn't happen at companies that aren't mission driven, that don't really believe in what they're doing and have an insane drive to just be better than everybody else. Oh, you said it'll take 18 months? Roger.
Hold my beer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Mission driven, customer focused. You know what the customer wants. You meet the customer where they're at. You don't tell the customer what they want. You listen to the customer and listen to what they want. Then you deliver upon the mission. We talk about how that relates to what we all learned in the military. You know, mission first, people always, right? You have to understand who you're working with. You have to understand your target. You have to understand your friendlies. Sounds an awful lot like a situation paragraph of an operations order.
Yep.
You have to understand your mission, your execution. And the reason that we persevere and win is because we are unwilling to take our eyes off of the prize. And we are willing to go up and down, to hit the valleys, to hit the climbs, to do the hard things, to meet the need of the people in service of the mission.
It's, but speaking of 5-paragraph op order, I can't tell you how much that's still used at this place. The original business plan for Black Rifle was a 5-paragraph op order.
It works.
It is such an efficient way to communicate information to a broad set of people. When you think about culturally within a company, how different a marketing team is versus a sales team versus an HR or legal team, accounting, finance, all very different types of people. A 5-paragraph op order.
Task to maneuver units, right?
Like
who's
it just
supporting
cuts
effort
right
on this one?
through
Who's the main effort?
When are they going to start teaching this in business schools? Like, when is this going to be? You guys both have. You've got an MBA. Do you have an MBA?
I have an MDiv.
Okay, I don't know what that is.
It's a Master's of Divinity.
Oh, well, it's a master's degree. Okay, it's just like
Brandon dug into the serious business.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you know, like.
That's a non sequitur, huh, Marty?
I'm just trying to stay on the right side of God here and not
Me
do
too,
a
brother.
joke.
If there's anything I learned in seminary, it's just keep trying to stay on the right side of God. That's basically all I got.
I was like, okay, let's make sure. I want to make fun of your not MBA, but also not make fun of God.
No, it's okay. It's you know.
And again, this is coming just like with the Best Ranger thing. I don't have a college degree, period. So
seems to be working out for you, my friend.
So far, I'm still gainfully employed. So far, everyday selection though. So we'll see by the time this podcast comes out, and that's the attitude I will always keep. Every day you got to go out there and earn it. But both of you guys, go have these graduate programs. I would argue that a 5-paragraph op order is as pertinent in business as it is in the seminary. Like, it is a method of communication in a very clear and concise way to plan against and execute a mission.
I think what we learned as young men in the military, what we learned in the SOF community, is that there are principles for leadership and effectiveness that work in a myriad of situations, because we always had to flex to a host of asymmetrical environments and still remain completely centered in our mission capability set and our culture, and completely oriented on actually achieving that mission. And so what Blayne and I share oftentimes is that really what this book is, what our entire practice is in Applied Leadership Partners, is we try to distill down what we call hard-earned leadership wisdom to share it with other leaders, regardless of sector, so that you can be more effective for the long haul, so that you can lead your teams more effectively. And when you think about it, whether it's a 5-paragraph op order, whether it's the leader that led the situation, the mission, however you look at it, all of these different things, these are simple frameworks that are designed for flexible application in a host of environments. And when you think about what wisdom is, it is truly that. We're kind of coming out of this knowledge economy right now. For many years we've been in this knowledge economy, but now with AI and the emergence of machine learning, large language models, all information is at our disposal. And so what we would suggest is that it is our opportunity to ignite the wisdom economy, because information is not enough. You can have all the information in the world, doesn't mean that you know what to do with it.
Analysis is not enough.
You don't know
that's right.
What you're reading is information. We live in a
misinformation, disinformation.
Information is such a broad,
bad actors.
Yeah, because it's available to everybody, that means it's available to be manipulated by
That's
everybody.
Right.
At no point in human history have you had more access to anybody, right? Before a book, right? More books are published today than at any other point in human history. It used to be very expensive to put a book together. You couldn't self-publish a book, not unless you were inordinately, very, very
wealthy,
right? Like
books. Anybody can start a podcast. Anybody can start a YouTube channel. Anybody, like, it is not like, oh, I got to get hired at a radio station to be able to talk on the radio and then only in 2-minute bites in between, you know, like we're not in that. And then you think about that's just the individuals. Then you layer in state actors, right? So we've never had more information at our fingertips. I'm getting away from business a little bit here, but because
but you're not.
No, you're not.
But you're not.
Okay, yeah, hey.
You're squarely in it because where you have information here, information is not the same as understanding. Okay, actually taking those discrete sets of data and applying them to their proper setting, and understanding is not the same as wisdom.
You know, now that you bring that up,
it's the experience. It is knowing, not just, you know, you think about information this way. It's kind of like the blueprints of the house. You got the blueprints of the house.
Yeah.
Right. Then, you know, you think about understanding information. You got like the boards, the nails, all the kind of equipment. You think about where's the understanding. That's like the blueprints. Okay. Now I know where to take the boards and the nails and everything and put it kind of together. But anyone that's built anything will know that when you actually do it, there's not a damn straight angle anywhere on that entire structure, because you actually have to figure out, how do I really do it, right? That's why we play the game. We don't just match up rosters and figure out who's going to win based on the rosters. You got to actually play the game. And when you do that, when you get out there and you build something, when you get out there and you do a mission, you start to accrue wisdom. Wisdom is that innate sense of earned confidence that starts to come together when you actually know how to do things. It is consistently knowing how to take the right information and understanding and apply it to the right circumstance to yield the best possible results. Doesn't mean it's going to be the perfect result every time.
No.
We can never be certain as we go through, which is a big trap that we all fall into in life and business. We are so prone to project out certainty, but we actually cannot be certain of much of anything. What we would suggest is far greater to be confident. You don't have to be certain, just be confident.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of taking some of these gems that we learned both in the soft world, gems that we learned in the commercial world, gems that we learned leading a nationally distributed social impact organization. And Blayne says this often, if you really want to test your chops at leadership, try leading a mostly volunteer-led organization with 150,000 people operating in 211 cities. Go for it.
Mm-hmm.
You really start to learn what is wise in all of this and what is actually effective, what actually gets shit done.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that we share with business leaders across the United States to help them create teams that have a common leadership language and compete and win in the marketplace for the long haul.
Yeah. One thing that I think about often is knowledge is knowing what levers to pull. Wisdom is knowing how hard and when to pull them, and I think that you only get that by getting the reps in and doing things like you brought up, like leading these large organizations where there's only so much you're ever going to get out of a book or out of information that you consume. There is a little bit of like, you have to do the thing.
You got to do the thing.
I mean, if you think about the world that we're moving into right now, or that we're really into, what are the things that are truly valuable? Like, where are you going to win at the margin? What's going to be the differentiator between you and anybody else? And it's coming down to the things that cannot be bought or cannot be given to you, right? So wherever you want to start on the spectrum, we can go there. But how about your physical health? How about your emotional well-being? How about your ability to remain calm in a chaotic environment? Yep, you can't give that to somebody. You can't buy that. You have to earn that through practice and experience. That is a huge competitive advantage if you want to be a leader in the fast-moving, chaotic world that we're in right now. Okay, how about discernment, judgment, right? Do you have the ability? Do you have the pattern recognition? Do you have that kind of innate sense of being able to sniff something out and say, this doesn't feel right? That doesn't look right to me. Like, you can't buy that. You can't get it rapidly. Yep. Some 22-year-old that just became a whiz at using AI tools cannot have that. You have to earn that through the reps. Okay, keep moving. How about things like morality, ethics, integrity, values, how you show up in the world, how you operate, the way you treat people, whether or not you're using all of this awesome technology and all these amazing tools to do things that are actually moving the needle on behalf of people. Like, how about that? I don't know. I think that kind of matters. How about authentic human connection? Yeah, I think there's a real premium on that right now, and it's only going to become increasingly so.
I think
Do you have the ability to make a real human connection with another person? Can you show up in an analog environment and establish rapport, build trust, create a culture? Like, these are the places. Like, I have two sons that are, my oldest is about to turn 19, my youngest is 15, and I think all the time about how to, for one, get them out of high school and out of the house and launch. But like, what are they going to do for a living? How are they going to be effective in the world? And it's kind of a barbell approach. I think, yes, they need to be aware of these tools and know how to use them and leverage them as tools.
Yep.
But also go hard in the paint on all these things that money cannot buy, cannot be outsourced, cannot be automated. Because if you have that set of skills and you have that orientation as a human, that character, if you will, that's going to make you absolutely incredibly valuable in no matter what you're doing. And so let's not be distracted by all this. Like, pay attention, use the tools for what they're good for. But if you are not actively trying to cultivate these human skills, again, everything from strength, physical endurance, mental calm and clarity, all the way through values, morals, ethics, discernment, judgment, human connection, like, you're screwed. You're not going to know up from down if you are not going really hard into that. Like, I think all the time about what success looks like right now.
Yeah.
Brandon and I have a small business. We're trying to make a living and pay our mortgages like everybody else.
Yep.
But I'm thinking a lot about, what can money not buy me? Do I feel good when I wake up in the morning? Am I at peace when I go to bed at night?
You
when I get home
in the mirror.
Yeah, when I get home from this trip,
Yeah.
Will my wife and daughter be happy to see me? Like, you can't buy that shit. So I'm spending a lot of time working really hard on that right now. And I would say, from a personal standpoint, that's where we need to be focused. But same in business. What is the culture of your business? What are people like when they show up every day? Are they just kind of turning on their their monitor and kind of fumbling through. Is their camera off while they're doodling away on conference calls? Like, these are hard challenges for us to face right now. There's not easy answers, but if you're not starting with the real human stuff, you can't like wallpaper over it with the high tech stuff. It's not either or, it's both. But if it's not rooted in the real stuff, like, good luck. It might work for a while, but it's not going to hold up.
It's not going to endure.
No.
Right. Like you that's a recipe for really bad times.
No, I hope you make a ton of money in 6 months trading crypto or getting a meme coin or whatever. Like, if that works for you, have at it. But like, probably not.
What you're likely going to find, though, is, and what many of us have found, is that you may, in fact, reach your mountaintop. But unfortunately, most of the time, you will reach it alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll look around and realize, this isn't what I was going for at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what happens to a lot of us. And so we
turns out to be Mount Washington.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, oh, God, it's terrible
Damn
up
it.
here.
You know, it is, you know, go back to some of those imperatives that we learned as young leaders, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what good is it if you accomplish your objective, but you lose your whole patrol or lose half your patrol along the way?
Yeah.
That's no good. It's no good in business. It's no good in combat,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we share some of that stuff. And really where this book came about was we were in a period of time. So go back to 2020. So Blayne and I, believe it or not, started our business March 17th, 2020.
God, I thought you guys had been around for longer than that for some reason.
Are you calling me old? You are killing
No,
me today.
I just, and this is also partially that thing that happened around 2020, 2021, where you're like, I'm still there.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
it hasn't registered that was 5 years ago.
I know.
So, no, I had it in my head that you guys had been running the business for not significantly longer, but I guess, yeah.
Well, we're on our 6-year business, but
Yeah.
the thing is that we opened our doors March 17th, 2020. 4 days later or 3 days later, the world shut down for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so there we were, a couple guys. We had, 3 gigs on the books as we were launching our business. 3 days later, we had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did what we know how to do best, which is focus on the mission.
Mm-hmm.
Don't succumb to the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Bet on ourselves, walk in faith. Those are 2 kind of consistent themes that are really ingrained in the values of our organizations. We bet on ourselves, we walk in faith.
Mm-hmm.
And we started to persevere. What we did was we actually hung free consulting sessions. We said 60-minute free whiteboard session. Take us up on it. We don't care who you are, what you're dealing with. We are here with you. 2 former soft guys. We've done some hard stuff. If we can help, we'd love to.
Just go put cans in hands.
That's right.
Just try it.
Yeah, that's right. We talked to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
We talked to insurance agents. We talked to public officials. We talked to sales representative, teachers. We talked to so many different people, and the themes were kind of the same.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly, it wasn't until the fall of 2020 when we really kind of got like tapped on the shoulder by a very large multinational healthcare organization that said, "Hey, we're doing our best to be on the front lines of rolling out the COVID tests. We feel like we're getting hit from all sides. We're kind of holding on, but can you guys come alongside and help us figure out how to navigate through this period of great uncertainty?" Large healthcare organization and also a Colorado's Special District Association. So smallest form of government in Colorado. Can you help us kind of get through all of this stuff? And what Blayne and I did is we kind of went to the lab, which is often what we do. We're kind of word nerds as we take these things that are out there in the leadership ether, like empowerment or empathy. And we're like, great, cool. What does that mean? Let's like take it back to the lab, kind of rip it down to its studs and figure out, what are we actually trying to say? And is there an effective framework that we can put in place to help people navigate through this concept so that they can, as Blayne said earlier, compete and win?
Mm-hmm.
And what we started to figure out is like, oh, you know what? Like, I think people are kind of just trying to endure. They're just kind of trying to hold on when they really need to persevere. They need to move on. They need to grow on. You kept hearing these things come up over and over again, like, well, when things go back to normal. And we were like, there is no going back, right? There's no going back to normal. Like this this is life
Mhm.
in reality. And so what we started to think about is this is actually the difference between persevering and enduring. And for me, it made me think an awful lot about the unknown distance march. You know, we do that all the
Yeah.
time in special operations context. You do it in the best ranger competition. It's kind of like the night one separator. It's a miserable experience. And for those of you that don't know who are listening, what an unknown distance march is, it's essentially put your rucksack on with all of your kit. So maybe 65-pound ruck, another 30 pounds with kit, weapon, all that kind of stuff. And go until somebody says stop. And oh, by the way, if you're any slower than a 15-minute per mile pace, your ass is out of the course. You're out of selection. You're out of the competition. Event is over.
Mhm.
And when you're in that setting, what happens is it's not so much the physical strain, because it is hard. Ruck marching's hard. Okay.
Mhm. Especially at a sub 15-minute pace.
With
You're-
all that weight on.
Yep.
It's difficult, right?
Yep.
But that's not what kills people. It's the uncertainty
Mhm.
that is maddening. It's not knowing when the finish line is actually going to be. And it's the guys that you hear that say, there's no way they're going to push us past mile 17. We're definitely going to stop at mile 17, and they break come mile 18 because they've established a false finish line.
Yep.
And that's what was happening. I thought a lot about the unknown distance march. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like this. And then Blayne was like, this is like SFAS. This is exactly what it was like for Blayne and SFAS.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just tell people that all the time. SFAS is physically hard, like Brandon said. Like, you should be prepared when you show up. It is physically hard. It's going to hurt. But most people that voluntarily withdraw, it's because they can't take the uncertainty.
Mhm.
Because there's not only is there no syllabus and it's different every time, there's also no feedback, which I think is really makes people crazy. And they know that. That's why they put you in that position. So you
Right.
just kind of hang out until an instructor writes something on the whiteboard, and then you show up in formation with, whatever they told you to bring, and you do an event that they tell you to do. And then when that's over, you go back to the hut and you wait for them to write the next thing on the whiteboard. And people spend so much time sitting there in the huts trying to speculate and predict what's going to come next. And the people who are really prepared and are really committed to, like, I'm just going to do whatever they ask me to do, they're working on their feet, they're repacking their rucksack. They have a sense of calm about them.
Mhm.
And the people who are a little less prepared, and the people who are not quite sure if they really want to do the job or if they just want to get selected as like a badge of honor, are the ones that are speculating and trying to play the prediction
Yeah,
game.
they're trying to predict.
And so that, for me, like 6 months into COVID, that dynamic just came front and center. I was like, oh, it's not how hard it is that's driving people crazy. It's the uncertainty.
Yeah.
It's the unknown. And so, like, how do we let people know that in a way that they can understand it, so
Yeah.
they can see it for themselves? And then how do we give them some tools to sort of take a breath and actually navigate through it? Because that's the other thing. It's one thing to kind of make people aware of the dynamics at play, but it's another thing to give them a framework through which they can actually start to manage
That is,
themselves.
right.
if there's like a gift that you could give to somebody and there's no way to gift it, but if there was one sort of intangible, is that ability to just have that mindset of like, it'll end when it ends. It'll stop when it stops. Until then,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Like, if you can gift that to people, and that there is a, like, right, like even going into the military, I don't think that I don't think that most people have that going in, but they learn it, because they went through a selection process, or they went through sort of an event where they just kind of reach that breaking point, and then for whatever reason they just keep going, and then they realize, oh, as long as you just don't quit, you just keep going. It really not easy, but it's really simple, super simple.
Yeah, I mean, we
right?
say
But,
all
like,
the time.
it's easier said than done for sure. But if you could just gift that ability to persevere like that, right?
Well, that's what we wanted to do in writing this book, is we wanted to gift that hard-earned wisdom to leaders all over the United States, all over the world. We wanted to be able to frame that. And so what we did is we kind of spent some time with that. We have a lot of stories in here that really kind of bring out some of those components like you talked about, where you start to figure out how to persevere. And we put it into a clear framework so that people could understand, look, this is adversity that you are facing, and you probably need to persevere. Because what happens is that We get hit with change and uncertainty, and oftentimes we try to endure. We try to run the same plays. Maybe we
Mhm.
make some hard decisions, but ultimately, all of us eventually reach the extent of our endurance.
Mhm.
And it is in those moments where we must persevere.
Mhm.
You're going to end up getting, wiped out at some point in time. We think about endurance like this. It's admirable, but we think about it a lot like a marathon,
Mhm.
right? It's a marked course. It's 26.2 miles. You know what the course is. You know what the training plan is going to be. You're going to have
Yeah.
to hydrate and fuel. You'll hit a wall sometime around mile 17. That's going to suck, but you'll get through it because you have trained and you will endure. And in doing so, on a course from point A to point B, by the time you get to point B, you are essentially a more tired version of who you were at point A.
Mhm.
Not so with perseverance. By the time you get to point B, you are not the same person that started the course at point A. You have persevered. And in doing that, what we share with people is that there are 5 factors of perseverance: change, uncertainty, acceptance, choice, and growth. And so we wanted to equip leaders with that so that they could see, look, it starts with change. Things come at you fast and often without any warning.
Mhm.
That brings about uncertainty. Uncertain in your capabilities, uncertain if you're up to the task, if you're the person to lead the team through it. Uncertainty, by the way, brings about a basic human emotion, and that emotion is fear.
Mhm.
We like to use a lot of proxy words like, well, I'm just a little bit concernicus. I'm a little bit anxious. It's fear.
Yeah.
And fear is the friction that holds us in place. Purposeful pain or pain will eventually make us move off that mark. We will either run from our pain or we will run towards our purpose. That is where acceptance comes into play. You shrink the world down to what you can control. You accept what you cannot control. And you start to make one good choice at a time. And choice, that 4th factor, this is where we choose to become our creeds, our values, our ethos, all the things that we say we are. This is where you actually choose to become that. And on the other side of that is growth.
Mhm.
You will be transformed. You will become the leader and the person that life is calling you into being. But you got to make the choice to do it. And that is perseverance right there. Change, uncertainty, acceptance, choice, and growth. And that is why we wrote this book, is because we wanted to share that with leaders out there, because we saw how many good people were feeling like they were just stuck in maddening situations. And we wanted to help them kind of, scrape off the fog and see clearly what they can control and how they can actually have agency in the process so that they can not only get through it, but grow through it, actually become better on the other side of it, and not just for themselves, but to lead their team through it. And that is another thing that is unique about the approach that we've taken here is, look, it's great if you can persevere through something as an individual. We got to lead a team through this.
Mhm.
We don't want to lose our patrol along the way. So this is really critical because leaders need more of just that internal focus. It's, yes, there's some internal aspects of it, but how do we lead our teams, not just to
How do you still accomplish
compete,
the
but
mission?
win? Yes.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
do it on your own. Because
Mhm.
perseverance is an endeavor best done together.
Yeah. I like you brought agency into it there. And, we talk a lot about this. And I think, the framework applies very broadly. But if we think about it in just like little regular everyday things, there are a lot of people that we talk to that feel stuck, like you said, in like, well, I'm in like Zoom or Microsoft Teams hell. I'm just in back-to-back meetings all day long. My inbox is this. And it's like, we get it. Like, we've been there, and I understand
Yep.
that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that we're trying to help people to really embrace is a greater sense of agency. To say, yeah, acceptance isn't about throwing your hands up and saying like it's out of control. It's about embracing fully what is within your control as well, and taking real ownership of that. And I think there are often far more opportunities to change things, to tweak things, to get creative than you might imagine. Like, I don't care whether that's in, change your meetings from being an hour to 45 minutes so you have some break in between. Or see if you can do all your 1-hour meetings in half an hour and see where you go. Like, try something out, see if it works. Like, you don't have to just succumb to these norms that are beating people down every day. If you are a salesperson and you're not having good luck wearing a suit, take your tie off and cuff your sleeves and go see if that's more comfortable. Or show up at all these offices at 4:55 p.m. when the doctor's actually finishing all of his patients, and see if you can grab a coffee after work. Like, try some stuff, make some choices, accept the aspects of this that are outside of your control. Think hard about the aspects, even if they're very few, that are within your control, and try some things, do some things, take some ownership. Don't just throw your hands up and feel like you've got to be on this treadmill of life. This is true in your personal life. It's true in your marriage.
Absolutely.
It's true in all these different facets. Stop thinking that you just have to like
Get
in the current and get swept up in all of it. I know it's hard, but if you can just pause long enough to say, hey, look, I'm not sure what tomorrow's going to bring. I'm not fully in control of a lot of things. Here is what I can do. Maybe it's getting up a few minutes earlier. Maybe it's, there are so many ways people can do this. And I think it just applies to so many aspects besides just nugging it out in SFAS or the Best Ranger competition. Like, this is true for all of us in so many ways. And it's not that I'm tired of hearing people say like, oh, I just don't have any control. Like, I feel for those people. Like, it hurts me to see people that are smart and capable and who once had a lot of fire behind their eyes to just be like, and like we're mid 40s, like a lot of our friends are in the thick of it, mid-career, school age kids. Yeah. And like to see the life run out of the face of so many people that I know, who I know to have a lot left in the tank.
Yeah.
Like for me, that's who I wanted to write the book for. I mean, first of all, kind of for me and for you, but for kind of our cohort of people who are out there just giving everything they got, in the thick of life right now, many of whom are just like, dude, I still want to stay fit. I still want to play with my kids. I still want to go on a guys trip every now and then. I still want to be involved in things that really light me up. I still want to crush it at work or start that business, but it's just like, How many people do you know that are like that right now?
Oh, quite a few. And
lots of people.
You bring up one thing, that sense of agency. I think that is one of these sort of like ultimate, particularly with business, right? Ultimate business unlocks that maybe some people know, some people don't. Unless it's illegal, you can do literally whatever you want. You look at like when you say you have no
Try
choice.
something.
Just God, we're recording this episode. I didn't watch the Academy Awards or anything like that, but the picture of Adam Sandler showing up at this like bougie awards thing in like gym shorts and a hoodie, like, dude, you can do whatever you want.
It doesn't mean there are no ramifications. By the way,
you are responsible. You are still responsible,
it's
but
still your choice.
Exactly.
Right? Your life is not happening to you.
But you can't say that you don't have a choice. There are very few circumstances.
Yes,
there are some. But they are very few and far between, any business, right? There are certain, like if you're a publicly traded company, hey, there are SEC regulations that you have to, like, those are non-negotiable, right? Of course. Like there are laws on the books of like, hey, if you value your freedom, you should probably not do these things, right? But short of that, right? Like short of that, you can do whatever you want. You really can. You can do the things that are going to have a positive impact on your business, or maybe we'll just shake things up enough to where once all the pieces land on the table, maybe you're looking at things a little bit differently and you can move forward in a way that you couldn't see before.
Yeah.
America. That's what we're talking about. We're so lucky to be here.
That is America. I mean, that's exactly right. And we share some stories in this book. The beginning of the book is highlighted by two stories where we as young leaders learned some pretty hard lessons. For me, it was in Afghanistan in 2003. We had a mission. The entire 75th Ranger Regiment was blown out to Afghanistan. We were alerted. It's called Winter Strike 2003. It was a miserable experience. For Blayne, he talks about being a ODA commander in 2009 at Anaconda in Afghanistan, and some really hard things happen. And I'll share just one kind of snippet of my experience in Winter Strike. So we were up off of the Pesh River Valley, way deep up in the Nuristan province, Hindu Kush mountain range, valley floor, 7,500 feet, climbing up ice chutes, clearing towns and villages at 11,000 feet. We were so high up that they couldn't resupply us, so we had to send resupply runs down the valley to get 1 meal per man per day for 30-day clip. It was, the temperatures were in the teens during the day and the single digits at night. true story, all the time in the military that I spent training, it was like, never build a fire. You never build a fire. The only time I ever built a fire? In Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Right? Because we had to.
Yeah.
We had to get the boys warm, or else we were going to lose casualty. We were going to take casualties from the weather, all of this stuff. And I will just tell you that after a couple weeks, we had essentially felt like we had been, wrung out and smashed against the rocks. Many of us were down 20, 30 pounds. We had fleas because we were living in these animal pens that we could bust into so that we could get the boys out of the cold, the whole 9 yards, and hitting dry hole after dry hole. So frustration, all of these things are mounting and mounting. And we had really been lucky in 2nd Ranger Battalion. We had been in the war now for 2 years. For me, I had been in Afghanistan much of 2002 and nearly all of 2003 because I was actually there when the war kicked off in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
So the Lost Company, Charlie Company, 2nd Ranger Battalion, plus 3 Alpha, the Earth Pigs, we were all stuck there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we get stuck there for a couple rotations. But we had basically gotten kind of lucky. We hadn't really taken too many big lumps. We had some injuries. I know like Matty Waters got hit on reindeer pretty bad. Dear friend of mine who was actually my RIP roommate.
Awesome guy, by the way.
love
I've
Matty
also got
Waters.
the pleasure of knowing him.
He's such a good dude.
Amazing person.
Yeah. I mean, so we had taken some lumps, but no real losses. Our luck ran out on November 14th, 2003, when J. Anthony Blessing was killed by a roadside bomb outside of Nangalam, Afghanistan. And I share what it felt like for me in that circumstance. So I was about 20 kilometers away.
Mm-hmm.
I remember hearing it over the command satellite radio. And it was after all these weeks of, this just miserable experience. And we weren't even supposed to be there. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I was supposed to be already down at Fort Benning doing RIP. But I got tagged and had to go because I was a senior squad leader in Charlie Company 275. And so we're all there. And I can honestly tell you that I just felt like I just wanted it to stop.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted it to stop. I just wanted to go home. I didn't care if I went home on my feet or in a box. It didn't matter to me. I felt so helpless and I had lost hope. My friend was dead 20 kilometers away and there was nothing that I could do about it. I wasn't even right there. And I felt so like guilty
Mm-hmm.
that I wasn't there. I knew my dear friends were out there dealing with that. They were experiencing that. 7,000 miles away, my wife was at home with a half-packed house and a kid who didn't even know who the hell his father was because I was never around his life. He was almost 2 years old. I just wanted it to end. And so again, even in moments like that, there's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And what we say to leaders all the time is that often you can tell that you're being called to persevere when the very next thing that you need to do is the very last thing that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to curl up in a ball and just say, I got nothing left.
But
meanwhile, 7 feet in front of me was our little world of Rangers, the Mad Slashers, 1 Charlie, 275. I was the weapons squad leader. We had a brand new PL who was in the 1 slot, and we had a bad platoon sergeant who was in the 2 slot. So there I am, the number 3 man, and everyone's looking at me. What do you do, leader? Did the only thing I felt I could do in that moment. Started putting on my kit and went out and trooped the line. Spent the next hour checking on the boys, or frankly, probably the other way around, them checking on me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got a question for you here because we've talked about this obviously a lot, but I've often thought that being a leader in some of those moments was actually sort of a blessing for me, a benefit, because you do have things you need to do. People need things from you. It's very clear. For me, it was just beat into me from the time I was at West Point. You're in charge of everything the platoon does or fails to do. And I know that in some of my hardest moments in the military, being in charge was actually, I think, a benefit for me. Because it just allowed me to say, look, I just have to do this right now. And I don't have time to think about that. I have civilian friends that have often asked, were you ever scared? Were you nervous? Did you fear for your life? And I'm not the toughest, coolest guy in the world by any stretch of the imagination. But I can honestly say, I didn't really fear for my life when I was in these circumstances. if I was on a helicopter going toward a target, I had a headset on and I'm listening to the pilots and I'm listening to the ISR and I'm listening to the other bird, the chalk leaders. And I'm just thinking about like, we got to get on the target. What are we going to do when the ramps go down? You know, like, and it was a gift. It was a blessing for me to just have a lot of other things to focus on besides like, is this bird going to crash? Are we going to get shot up when we land in the poppy field? Like, I just didn't think about a lot of that stuff because I think I had the benefit of having other shit to do. And then, you know, you have to reconcile some of that afterwards, obviously, which, you know,
You put it on the credit
years,
card.
maybe. Yeah, that's exactly
Absolutely.
right. That's and the interest piled up pretty bad. I know I just speak for myself after a couple of years, but in the moment, I did not find it to be particularly, I mean, it was hard, but it was obvious what needed to be done. Yes, I didn't want to do it, but I knew what I needed to do. It really came due when those interest payments piled up later for me personally.
Yeah, for sure. And we can certainly get into that if we wish. But I will tell you though that I think you're right. This is like the blessing of being a jump master, right? Like when you become a jump master, you're just like, I'll either safety or I'll AJ or I'll PJ. I'll do that because if I'm being honest, jumping out of an airplane scares the shit out of me. Always has, but I'm like, I'll jump master. Just let me jump master because I'm so active. I have so many things to do that I'm not focused on the feeling. Like I'm putting that in the bank, you know, to pay for later. But that is the blessing of that. And so when I think about that moment, you know, going back to that little apartment in Kantiwa South in Afghanistan is, yes, I agree. Because what I think about Matt and Pete and John and Chris. I think about all those guys and I see their faces and I say like, that's why I say, you know, yeah, I did what I had to do. I did the next best thing I could do. And sure, you know, I did my best to kind of hold it together, you know, when in charge, be in charge kind of stuff. And, you know, the trope that we always share, like when the bullets start flying, the first place everyone's going to look at, leader, is you. And what you do, they do. As you go, the team goes. But it was those guys that held me up, is the truth. Those guys held me up. And that is the thing that, you know, we can tell these stories, right? And we do tell these stories because we think it's important to share where we cut our teeth on some of these lessons. But in the end of the day, I don't share that story so that any leader picks up this book and go be a Ranger weapons squad leader in Afghanistan in 2003. We do it so that we can open up that new window into that old truth, which is that you actually have agency, even in those times that it feels like you're helpless and hopeless in the darkest moments. What you choose to do next will determine whether or not you grow through the experience, because you can just as easily make the choice to just stay stuck in it and suffer for suffering's sake, as opposed to suffering for significance and grow on the other side of it.
Yeah. And you know, what's the alternative, right? Like a lot of these like moments of crisis. And I just want to frame that for people to really understand. A lot of people, when they think about war, they think about firefights and combat and all that sort of stuff. When you think about what the really tough aspects of it can be are, I've got fucking fleas. I got a dude that I know that's dead. And I can't
Came
see
up with
him
in the
or anything
battalion.
else like that. And I haven't been warm in over a month. I haven't had 3 meals in a day. And how long? Like that is.
And I've been around for 3 of the first 36 months of my marriage. And I missed my son's birth. And I'm a guy whose dad took off on him when I was 11.
Yeah.
And all of these things are compounding.
You can pile those up for sure. And, you know, your choice in that situation is either be the person that you're going to be proud of being later on in life or not, and have regrets around that.
That's right.
You know, like that really is your choice. And that's a choice that everybody has, whether they're in business or they're in war or combat or anything like that. It's like either you're going to be the person that you can feel good about how you conducted yourself in a moment of crisis, whether that was personal crisis in a company, crisis on a battlefield. There's so many different versions of crisis, right?
Yeah, we don't have a monopoly on crisis in the military.
Exactly. Not at all, right? And I challenge anybody that is a combat veteran, go talk to a metropolitan paramedic.
Amen.
Like, holy cow. You think you've seen some bad stuff. Go talk to a paramedic that's and worked in any metro area.
Yeah.
But
go talk to a single mom in the inner city.
Yes. And so there's these things here of like, but you know, everybody though can take away from them and say like, you really do have to frame it. It is not, easy by any stretch to get through that, but it is a really simple proposition. It really is. You might try to come up with a way to make it complicated in your head, right? You really can. And maybe one of your defense mechanisms is to focus on the complicated aspects in those situations as a distraction. Not that it's not a valid distraction. I'm glad, Blayne, as a team leader, you were paying attention to ISR and how far out you were from the target and things like that. That's a good thing,
For the record, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure the team appreciated that the team leader wasn't like dozing off in the bird thinking about philosophy. But that's all. It's like you can almost come up with a skit. It's like the overly neurotic PL or team leader that's just like contemplating Marcus Aurelius, and meanwhile you're like the 30-second call is going out. And,
hey, dude.
Yeah, and you're like, what is life?
What is life? What are you doing? Unhook your snapling. Get off the bird.
Oh, there's the West Point guy. Is there a philosophy major at West Point, or is it all just engineering?
No. You can major in a lot of things, actually. Everyone has to be an engineering minor. But
That's what it is. I was going to say there's something like there's no free lunch at West Point.
No,
Everybody's got like
physics,
a hard
chemistry, calculus, all of that. Yes, everyone has to have a physics minor essentially. But you can major in Spanish, art, philosophy, and literature. You can certainly major in engineering. A lot of people do, but
yeah,
I was an economics major. I thought I was going to be an engineer until I realized I wasn't quite as good at math as I thought I was. And I was like, maybe the social sciences are a little more my speed. Like there's just enough math in there to
both useful things to understand.
Yeah,
for sure.
And,
yeah, definitely.
Marty, you brought this back to crisis, right? And I made the statement that look, veterans don't have any kind of monopoly on crisis, and so what we see is that we can share these kind of stories, and it's nice and everything like that, and that might give us some credibility. But real leadership presence comes at the intersection of credibility and relatability, relating it to what people are experiencing, approaching them with a level of curiosity, with a level of empathy, trying to seek to understand what they are experiencing. And one of the things that we do most often in our practice is when we come alongside these organizations that are having these struggles or going through a lot of stuff, right? Maybe it's a consolidation, reorganization, an acquisition. Maybe there's a capital event that has occurred, some brand of growth, change, or adversity. You know what? Like that shit's pretty hard. It's actually pretty hard, especially if you care. If you don't care, it probably doesn't feel that hard. But we got to be honest with you. Most of the leaders that we interact with, most of the people, like nobody wakes up in the morning and says like, man, I kind of just want to suck today. I don't really care about what I'm doing. Most people care very deeply about where they are spending their 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day, what they are doing, the mission that they're headed towards. And so one of the things that we do most often is kind of show up and say like, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's hard. What you're experiencing is hard right now.
Yeah.
It is very difficult, and it's particularly hard because you care. And guess what? There's a word for that. It's normal. You're actually normal. Now, let's shrink the world down to what we can control and start making one next best decision at a time so that we can persevere through adversity.
Stack some wins.
Yes.
Confidence
small
targets.
little-
You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Stack some wins. Well, guys, I think we got a good podcast in the can here. I would love for you guys just to talk about the book a little bit. Where can people find it? This is out pretty much everywhere books are sold, right?
That's it, dude.
Wherever books are sold. Isn't that fun to say?
Yeah.
Don't you love saying that?
Yeah. Well, I never made it into the airports, not yet. So that was always kind of like the unlock
So we're not.
for
Don't
me.
you, it's like a pay to play thing.
That's
to be
a pay
in the
to play.
airport.
Don't you do that to yourself.
You'll notice right. The grass is always greener. There's
Come on
always right. It's not. You start off with like, man, I'd love to be a published author. I'd love to write a book, or
Send me,
you
baby.
start off with I'd love to
Send
write
me.
a book, right? Write a book. And then it's like, oh, but it would be great to be published. And then it's great to be published and sell a couple books or reach some sort of threshold that you've got in your head. And it's to make a list or have it sold in these places. Oh, I want to go see it on the shelf at Barnes and Noble or whatever.
Yeah.
and then it's always the next thing, right?
Yeah.
There's always the next thing.
Yeah, for the record, I've read your books. They're exceptional. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Send
Yeah.
me. If you guys have not read, send me. Damn.
If you've not read
so
Send
good.
Me, I don't know. I can't help you.
Yeah,
I don't
so
know what's
good.
going on with you.
Yeah, no, it's a Send Me, The True Story of a Mother at War is the last one I put out. I am very excited. We just I'll do a little bit of self promotion here. We just got this screenplay back for the movie, and I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited that there's a movie happening around it. And again, you think about those moving targets, right? Most people who've written a book would be absolutely ecstatic to know that their book was even optioned for film. Never mind, hey, there's a there's all these different things. Now it's like, oh man, how's the movie gonna be? Like, is the movie gonna do good? Like it's always, there's always the next thing. But I think that's a good problem to
Well,
have. If you're a
you're on the
competitive
ridge
person.
line. You're on the
Yeah.
ridge line of adversity, as we call it. You're in it.
Yeah. But that's so that's a good book. This is a good book. This is something and again, I'm gonna mess up which order to put the words in
Do
here.
you want us to do it instead?
Yeah, I would really appreciate that.
It's-
Perseverance is greater than endurance.
That's right. Perseverance is greater than endurance. Lead with resilience. Grow through adversity.
Yep.
Win together. It is available wherever books are sold. If you
Except
would like, you
airports.
can go to perseverancebook.com and it will take you to a landing site that will let you decide where you like to buy your books.
Yeah.
And we would be delighted if you would go pick up a copy.
Mhm.
And we hope that you find it useful. We really do.
Yeah. I'll give you what might feel like a bullshit answer, but is really the truth for me. Is that I want people to read it. I hope they do. I feel completely satisfied with the effort right now.
Yeah.
Honest to goodness, I've had an awesome time writing this with Brandon. I'm super proud of the effort. We've shared it with people that we care about, that we trust, including
Mhm.
you, that, we trust their opinion. We value their feedback, and people have said, they've said it's good.
Yep.
And so if the general public reads it and it takes off, that would be great. But the exercise alone was remarkably valuable for me. To get a little bit of feedback from people that we trust and value their opinion has really meant everything. And it feels like it's all gravy at this point. Like, I sincerely mean that. Like,
Yeah.
I feel great about it.
You're in the fun part right now.
Yeah.
Just go out, sell a book, go on podcast, talk about your hard work. Like it's dude,
Talk
this
to
is
your
the
friends
fun
on
part.
podcasts.
Yeah.
Rip some Black Rifle
Yeah.
energy drinks, sell some books.
Dude,
have
how
some
lucky
fun.
are we that this is our job?
This is the
Yeah.
dream, guys.
This is, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm
You could
good.
do a
I feel
lot
great about
worse. All right. Well, hey, appreciate you guys coming on, and we'll. I hope a couple people go and pick up this book, and along with that, maybe go subscribe to the Coffee Club because you like coffee, you like energy drinks, you like caffeine. This is the Black Rifle Coffee Podcast. Thanks for watching, listening, however you consume this.